Good morning, it's 10 o'clock and we are in Carlisle. Now, many of you will know becoming a parent for the first time is a joy. It's a totally understandable view of parents-to-be, outside observers, and mums and dads looking back on many years past. But the actual early days of being a mother can involve so many new responsibilities that life becomes an 18-hour day, sometimes full of problems, and for some people, very big problems. That's our subject for today. And if I may start off with a young lady who has yet to face the problems, how many weeks?
5 weeks to go.
And that'll be your first son or daughter, whichever it turns out to be.
First, yes.
Now, as we discussed this morning, the problems that face young mothers, do you think we might be helpful or might we cause terrible problems for you?
I don't know, I think you might be fighting me away. It's too late now.
Too late now, yeah. Well, as things progress, any time you want to say, hang on a second, what do I do in that situation? Because I'm about to start, interrupt, okay?
I will do.
Because you are actually going to be far better at asking the questions in this programme 5 weeks away than I ever will be. Can I ask all those people who have been mothers, what problems does one face when one actually comes home for the first time with the baby, husband goes off to work having greeted the baby and the mother with tears of joy, and suddenly the front door's closed? I'd like to get the menu of problems that face young mothers. Well, you start off with a menu, yes.
You spend 9 months of your pregnancy being prepared for the birth, having people taking care of you, giving you attention. But as soon as you're home with the baby, there's nothing prepared you for that time. You feel you're home and you're alone, and you've just got to get on with it. And
suddenly, that joy becomes a problem which you look at and think, my God, how am I going to cope with it?
Shock, horror and panic.
Can I ask you, what was the biggest shock, horror, panic that afflicted you?
It was this complete disorganisation. I'd worked for a long time. I was in my late 30s when I had my only child. And I had a good job. It was an organised job. I knew what I was doing, where I was going each day. And all of a sudden I was at home with this lovely little baby. But I was just so disorganised. I never got dressed properly in the morning. I was just a lump in T-shirts and grotty jeans. My hair was always all over the place.
The sink was full of washing up?
Yes, and there was this horrible nappy bucket in the bathroom. It was awful.
Are we depressing you? but in this new age, don't worry, the nappies, there'll be paper disposable ones which you'll just chuck away. So that's at least one problem you have.
Yes, go on to those.
It was organised chaos, I mean, or disorganised
disorganised chaos. I just couldn't believe it. I had this idea that I would have all this spare time. I'd feed the baby, I'd tidy him up, put him to sleep, and I'd have all this time to do what I wanted. I would make bread, I would decorate things, I would do so much.
You would sing with joy.
That's right. I finally made bread last year and my son is 7½.
Okay, right, who else? Come on, let's have some more. Who else has gone into a problem in those early days? Where?
I got depressed after I'd had the first one. When I was in hospital, I used to cry all the time, and I was looking forward to it, but I was only 18, and I had to move away from Ambleside and start a new life, make new friends.
So you were right down at the bottom from the word go. I mean,
for about 6 months, yeah.
What did that depression actually do to your daily life when you actually got home with the baby?
I just couldn't be bothered with anything. My husband did it. I just used to sleep and cry, and I wouldn't do anything.
Day in, day out? Did your husband try to pressure you to sort of pick yourself up?
My family did help me, yeah. They pulled me through. When my mum realised what was going on, my family pulled me through it.
Well, I mean, I know there's a thing called postnatal depression, but that was more extreme than that, wasn't it?
No, it was. It was postnatal depression. That's what the doctor said it was.
Doctor? For 6 months? That's a bit more than ordinary postnatal depression,
No, that's short for postnatal depression.
Really?
You're talking about baby blues, and that lasts a few days or a couple of weeks, and I'm frightened, I don't know what to do with this pink squeaky thing. But proper postnatal depression can go on for years and is very severe.
Did you go through baby blues when little tweaky thing?
I think I did have a little week once or twice.
but postnatal depression, no.
No.
Postnatal depression. Well, postnatal depression is obviously very serious, and I want to discover what the other serious things are. But what about the more mundane things? Exhaustion.
Yeah.
Where are you? I can hear.
Yeah, it's tiredness, really.
How many hours a day do you think you were doing?
Well, I think the most tiring thing is getting up at night. I found that very tiring. And I did find, as soon as I could sleep the night through, I was less tired and coped much better. And getting out helped as well.
Taking care of yourself as well. Always making sure you're presentable, because you feel so grotty and ugly and you think, oh my gosh, I hope nobody comes to visit me. I'm tired, I'm drawn. But I always try to say, well, to my husband, there's your baby. I'm going to have a bath. I'm going to brush my hair. I'm going to put on some makeup. And I want to feel better, because I had to be selfish so that I could give my child more love.
Well, you went through a tougher situation than most people, because you had your babies already. I mean, you were already in the wheelchair. So from the word go, in a sense, running the household with a baby in it was much more difficult for you, presumably, on a daily basis.
Yes, I threw a few things around. And got mad.
At your husband?
No, he moved.
I see.
Whenever he realised, you know, that I was a bit like that, you know. And I had a postnatal depression, which only set in maybe about 6 weeks after my second child was born. My husband said, there's something wrong with you. You better go to a doctor. And I did. And talking it through with my husband and the doctor, and with the aid of some drugs, we got through that.
You sound to me as if you're fortunate in as much as you had a husband who instantly twigged the situation. I mean, I became a father in 1960, and I must confess that I think in the 1960s, perhaps dads were not as aware of the problems afflicting a mother in her early days as they are now. I can't say I was extremely sensitive. I don't know when you became a father, sir, but would you?
At the same sort of time, yes.
And looking back on it, do you think you were fully in tune?
No,
with
not at all. Totally unprepared. I mean, we talk about the mother's problems. There's problems for the dads as well. There's suddenly having to change your whole lifestyle to accommodate a baby in the household when you've been used virtually to doing your own thing, albeit with your wife. You've been two people on your own for 1, 2, 3, 4 years or whatever it was.
Were you jealous?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, I suppose in some respects, to be honest, the answer is probably yes, that I suddenly found I was not getting the attention that I was used to. And you've got to learn to cope with that.
But were you also doing what I think I was doing, which is going to work in the morning, saying, well, I'm off to a hard day's work.
Oh, yes, very much so.
And coming back in the evening and saying, my word, I have had a hard day's work.
Oh, yes.
And actually not particularly saying to your wife.
Yeah, very much so. I think it was really a case of saying, you know, look what I've been doing, dear, aren't I a clever boy? And forgetting the fact that she's had a whole day with a young baby in the house.
Can I ask young mums, I mean, I think we are confessing our sins, aren't we?
Yes.
Can I ask young mums, are young husbands now different? Has it changed? Or are there still some like our generation?
When I had my baby, and I never got up once for a night, he always used to get up and feed the baby and change his nappy. I was always a good sleeper.
So your husband was totally in tune with the situation?
Yeah.
Yours?
He would do it sometimes, yes, but not often. I mean, he's already got 2 children from a previous marriage, and, you know, I thought he would be a good help, but he's not been as big a help as I thought he would. I'm still the one that gets up during the night.
So you're still carrying the major burden?
Yes.
I mean, I presume there must be some mothers who say to themselves, well, I'd like my husband to carry some of the burden, but on the other hand, he is working enormously hard, and therefore I don't want to trespass upon his time. I don't know. Is that so?
I used to do that, sort of get up in the evening. Sort of, in our generation, we used to expect the men to go out and be relaxed when they went to work. And if you felt it was your place to see to the baby, admittedly when they came home at night, you expected them to do something. If it was just play with the children, you know, after bath time or something like that. But I always used to feel, well, he's doing the work during the day, so therefore I must allow him to go, you know, with a...
Sorry, yes?
With the sleepless nights, you know, the same I had the similar attitude. You know, I've got to get up. It's my baby. I'm responsible. But she said that's a load of rubbish. He can get up and look after it. You've got to have your wits about you during the day, especially when they start toddling around. You need your sleep. So if your husband can get up to see to the baby, let him, and you can sleep, and then you'll be more fresh during the day.
But there again, if your baby takes a nap in the daytime, I mean, you can have a lie down on the settee. I've done that many a time. To cat nap, you know, to sort of catch up a little bit, you know.
Can I move to the more fundamental problems? I mean, we've had one situation where you've talked about a 6-month depression period. I know it wasn't your firstborn, it was your secondborn, but you had a very fundamental problem with that, didn't you?
Yes, I didn't want her. Not that I, emotionally I didn't want her, not physically. I didn't feel anything for her. I wanted to have this baby, I planned this baby, but I didn't feel anything for her. And when the nurses handed her to me when she was born, I just wanted them to take her away.
And that presumably instantly made you also feel guilty.
Well,
so that you were
until
riding with
last
two
year,
situations.
I told her about it last year, and until then I had felt so guilty that I had denied her the feeling she should have had. I was frightened to tell her, and when I did tell her last year, she was so casual about it. She was marvellous. You know, she said, "That's in the past, Mum." She was really marvellous.
Were you ever able to work out what it was that had happened?
It was depression,
it was part of the same depression situation?
Yes, I had to have medication. I think it was Valium or something simple like that, you know. But I did have to have the help. And once I started on the tablet, the doctor had told me it wouldn't begin to work, the medication wouldn't work until I had stopped taking it. And within about 2 months, I did begin to feel things as I was holding her and working with her. I did begin to feel, you know, she was mine and
the
I wanted
bond
to have
began
her.
to develop?
Yes.
If I can bring, I mean, NSPCC and doctor, depression and this initial lack of emotional response, presumably both fairly normal reactions? Quite common. And do they ever produce... What was that? Oh, it was a camera. I thought it was somebody falling off the platform. Do they ever produce a very negative situation in the household, or are they usually dealt with and coped with?
They can do, but depending on the help really that's around, whether it's a supportive family that the lady before was saying, the family helps her through that, or we've got health visitors coming in that can provide the support and identify the problem really before it gets too bad.
I did that myself. Nobody knew how I felt. I went to the doctor and said, you have to do something because I feel that I don't feel anything for this baby and I may take it out on her when the depression hits me. You know, as I feel upset and tired and lonely, I may take it out on her. And fortunately, my doctor's wife had just had a baby and he knew what I was going through, so he was able to help me.
But I suspect all doctors aren't quite as responsive. That's the
they're
problem,
not.
isn't it?
I think because people feel guilty that they feel that way, then it's very difficult to actually say to somebody, to confess almost. You feel that it's just you that feels that way. That's right.
Can I table the next difficult word, which is violence? I'm not suggesting that anyone is violent out of a deliberate sense of deliberate inhumanity. Throwing a plate, so it seems to me to be a perfectly reasonable phenomenon of domestic life. I've thrown one or two in my time. But I am talking about when the psychological situation becomes so problematic that the fuse really is getting short. As a GP, have you ever talked to a patient who was a first-time mum and began to get seriously worried about whether the fuse is snapping?
Oh yes, many times. I mean, in a way, I'm amazed that any child survives to 5, to be quite honest. I mean, the demands made on a mother by any baby are so great, but most people are able to step back from that line.
Have you had mothers who have actually said to you, look, I've come to you today because yesterday I did actually hit the child very badly?
Yes, yes.
What were you able to advise them in that situation? What do you do if you do have somebody coming confessing honestly about a potentially very dangerous situation?
I think that the fact that mum has come is a huge step forward. I mean, it's the ones that are at home that you worry about. The one that can come and admit to a professional person that's how they feel is going to have the help and support and also the motivation to do something about it. And the NSPCC, health visitors, and involving the family can all make a tremendous difference within a relatively short time.
You're also a member of OPUS, the organisation to help parents under stress,
That's
OPUS. Right. And their phone number is going up incidentally during the course of this programme. So if there are any mothers or fathers, for that matter, who haven't got the courage to go to their GP...
That's right.
They ought to use that phone number.
Yes, and that's non-professionals.
Yes, do.
It took me 15 years to tell her that.
So for 15...
It was so important to tell her.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes, because I felt that she must feel there was something missing. Whether she did or not, I felt she must feel that. And when I explained it to her, she didn't act as if that was the situation. But that's how I felt.
Weight off you
It was terrible. I kept trying to compensate all through her life.
What it amounts to is that you eventually chose to get what was a secret shame out of your system.
Yes.
And you felt much better.
Yes.
And to your delight, your daughter said, oh, well, that's all right,
That's
Mum.
right.
So
But
what?
the thing is, there's so many women who feel like that. I didn't realise there's so many women who go through this who don't know what it's all about.
Well, we're going to pause, and I thank you for talking about that, because there are people out there who I hope will be talking about it. We're going to pause for a couple of minutes, back shortly. Back to today's programme, trying to discover how difficult it is to cope with being a parent. Can I just check, now, 5 weeks away, let me, if I may come back to you on that heading. How are you doing so far? What do you think? Which bits worried you most?
I think getting up in the night, because I've got the same view as what you've said, that my husband's a school teacher, and I feel that he has to be in quite a good mood and be with it to go to work. So I feel that I should be the one to get up in the night.
So it's fatigue, which probably...
My neighbour here doesn't agree with me.
No?
No. When I had my first baby, my husband got up every other night. We literally split everything in half. We shared all the jobs. He still went to work.
Newborn democracy, isn't it?
My work was being at home and looking after the baby while he was at work doing his job. And when we were both in the house, it was our work. And we've always carried on like that.
Then, did you?
But that's why I chose not to. That was one of the reasons I chose not to.
Forgive me being a bit of a thing. What's the difference? Why would breastfeeding... Oh, of course! Husbands can't breastfeed. I feel like Nana. I do hope Mr. Gorbachev isn't watching. Keep going. So it works all right for you,
yes,
on an alternate basis with no breastfeeding. And you'll find out the hard way.
I'm not breastfeeding either, but I
Do you
still
not
believe...
think that you're denying yourself something, some closeness with your child? I mean, breastfeeding to me was one of the very important parts of having a baby. It was something I was desperate to do. And particularly because of the circumstances of the birth of my daughter, I had to have an emergency caesarean section. So I felt that it was even more important, because I wasn't a witness at the birth, it was even more important to me to breastfeed my child.
And my guess is that it's enormously psychologically important to some mothers, but not necessarily psychologically important to the baby. But I will turn, as an amateur, as you know, to a doctor. Am I right or wrong?
9 months weighing up whether I wanted to or not. I gave it a lot of thought, and I decided that I didn't think I was ready for the total responsibility as much as anything else.
I didn't have total responsibility for my daughter, because although I did the breastfeeding part of it, obviously, my husband did other things, nappy changing, bath time, taking baby out for walks. That there are more things to looking after a baby than just feeding or feeding through the night.
Doctor, how important to the child as opposed to the mum is breastfeeding?
Well, I mean, mother's milk is the best feed for a baby, but certainly formula feeds are a good second best. And yes, I mean, an awful lot of babies are brought up quite happily on formula feeds.
It has an emotional significance to a much greater extent than having a chemistry significance. Is that reasonable to say?
Well, yes, I mean, mothers enjoy it. Mothers who breastfeed enjoy it and value it as part of bringing up the baby.
I don't think I've met the rest of the programme build around breastfeeding. May I change gear, having shown myself to be a nana in this area? We have talked about early days, but we have talked so far to, I think, married couples or living together. I wanted to find out what it was in terms of a single parent being a parent for the first time. If you're actually bringing a baby home to a place where there isn't a husband or the fella, what are the problems which afflict you there?
Tell, because you've got no one to help you out. I mean, when I had my son, I didn't know that I was pregnant until it was too late. I was only 17. I went to hospital, I was rushed into hospital, I had him. I had no clothes, nothing for him at all. He was in hospital for 2 months, I had 2 months to get everything prepared for him. And I was living in a children's home, so I couldn't have the father of my child with me anyway. And he could only come up and stay for a couple of hours, spend a couple of hours with his son each day. and he would have to go back. And it was me that had to get up all the time. And I had no one to help me there.
So you weren't in a situation where Mum and Dad were backing you up all the time as well?
No.
They weren't there, were
They
No.
weren't there. I've no family here.
So you went through a very rough patch, I suspect. I mean, of sheer fatigue and an emotional vacuum as well. I mean, did you feel despairing emotionally or not?
I
mean,
felt
did it make you
I think it
happier
was
or sadder?
aloneness.
Did,
Felt alone.
did having the baby in your arms make you feel better or worse?
Better in one way, because I had something that was mine. First thing that I could say, this is mine.
Yes.
Nobody can take this from me. But in another way, I saw the hatred. I think it was hatred really, because I had nothing. I had nothing to give him. But I didn't see him as a little boy that I had to bring up for the rest of my life. I just saw a cute little baby. And at the age of 17, you don't see responsibility.
So it took you, I mean, how long was it before you managed to get onto an even keel and think, OK, that's happened, I've soldiered through, and now I'm happy and proud again?
It wasn't until I got my own place, until I left the children's home.
And then you began to feel a complete person?
Yeah. And I got engaged, and my fiancé moved in with me. And it wasn't until I had my own house. I was like a family. I had my own family then, so I didn't need anybody else.
So you're now a happy mum?
Oh, I'm a happy mum. I'm a single mum, but I'm a happy one.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think you got to. I congratulate you on soldiering through that, because I'm sure that is actually more difficult than the ordinary family situation. I mean, you are a social worker. Yes, I've got to say your surname. Do you mind if I do? You're the only lady I've ever met with the surname 20 men. And it has nothing to do with your private life, does it? It is.
Nothing at all.
As a social worker,
I'm a health visitor. There's a difference between social workers and health visitors.
As a health visitor, going into homes where ladies are confronting problems, I mean, do you often find problems as rough as the one that she was facing as a
Very
single
much so nowadays. In today's climate, there's a lot of single parents, a lot of young children, young girls getting pregnant. I really think one of the problems that we could counteract that with is more education in schools, in the teenagers, the problems of babies and the total commitment you have to a baby when the baby arrives. I mean, with the demise of the larger family, most teenagers nowadays don't have babies round about them in their own house. Everybody's got 2-point children and they're all grown up together, and these teenagers don't have a lot of babies around. So they don't know the total commitment they have to give to a baby. And really, I think health education in schools would help.
Well, health education obviously could hopefully control the number of children that arrive unwanted,
yes,
as
but
it were.
it would give them an idea of what they want, because quite a few single girls as well feel they're pregnant and they think, oh, it's going to be a nice little doll, I'll dress it up, I'll take it for walks with my friends. But I mean, they're not little dolls. They cry, they make messes on the floor, and they're there
work.
all the time. Yes, they are there all the time.
What I would like us to do, if we can, is table the list of various help situations that a mum in despair can go to. And I want to start off because I know that you believe very passionately that the family one is one of the most important.
Yes. I don't know. When my parents live 400 miles away, but I was lucky enough to have my mother come up for both my children when they were born and stay for 2 or 3 weeks. And I don't know what I'd have done without her.
So, I mean, if there's grandma and grandpa arriving in their car at the garden gate, that's a great moment, because it's a relief valve. Must be for most people.
I'm sure it must.
If grandma and grandpa can't get there, then and a friendly neighbour is there, then presumably that's also an enormous help. But what about when the going gets rougher than that, particularly where people are shutting themselves in because they almost want to isolate themselves? I presume that's something that you discover. Fear.
Fear of the unexpected, because depending on what your previous experiences are, whether you come from a big family or you're not used to, like you said before, not having children around, that sort of thing. Because we're all the sum total of previous experiences. And if you've had good experiences, lots of people have, but lots of people have not. They've perhaps been brought up in a single parent family and they're going through the same thing themselves. So it can be a combination of things, really, a combination of circumstances that perhaps someone ends up feeling really alone. not able to communicate the needs as well, is it?
I don't want to push into individual case histories, but working for the NSPCC, you obviously know more about violence in the home than any of us. To what extent do you sometimes feel that there is violence in a home afflicting a young firstborn child, which is not in any sense to do with lack of love, but is actually to do with fuses blowing, tempers flaring, the pressures becoming intolerable?
I think that's around a lot, really. I think anger, we're all aware, is a human failure, if you like. It's part of human nature. But no, that's right. I mean, anger's one thing, but when it becomes more than that, and it's a fine line, really, sometimes.
You see, you've said quite rightly there is no excuse to take it out on children, but I think, and I'd like you to talk to each other, that there is a sort of anger resulting in that act of violence, which is not planned. It's presumably, I mean, it starts as an emotional slap, does it?
It can, I mean, it can be, with some people, a one-off thing. But it's when it gets more than that obviously it starts to become a problem. When you recognise that it's about, I suppose, more premeditated, if you like, thinking about you're going to hurt this child. But everybody can get to a point, I suppose, where they feel that they've reached breaking point.
I think it's much more common than people think. I mean, I think that, as Denise says, I think every parent has the potential to be violent to their children, and it isn't planned very often. I think the difficulty when we become involved, the difficulty is maybe when it is planned, but the majority of time it isn't planned.
Well, what I would do, I think the important thing...
A group of people, we will all admit to having had our bad moments when we thought it was going to happen. And if you talk within a group of women, particularly, who have confidence in each other, they will all admit to having been on the brink. But most of us have some kind of strategy, either walk away from it, say, give the baby back to your husband or whoever it might be, or simply leave the room or whatever it might be. And those are the things that most people, through their own lifestyle, know how to cope with. There are some people who simply don't know how to cope with that within themselves, and some kind of education at some stage can help that. And if you have a very bad temper, there is no excuse for taking it out on anybody, but you've got to learn how to control it. And most people don't get that chance of learning how to do it.
I presume, and we often say this on this programme, one of the most important safety valves in life is talk. If you talk, then you're on the way. But what I find worrying is what do you do to people who are too inhibited, too embarrassed, too introverted, too isolated, too whatever, to talk? I mean, do you meet people who actually...
I would like to think that everybody who has a child under 5 or even over 5 knows the health visitor and is able to turn to the health visitor.
I suspect they don't, though.
I know, but I like to think that I personally know all my mothers. I visit them quite a lot in the first year of life, and I hopefully can tell the telltale signs and visit a bit more frequently.
What do you regard as the telltale signs?
Crying all the time and sort of being withdrawn, and the way they react with the baby as well. I mean, when we go, we're always looking at that. I mean, as health visitors, we're not going to see how much dust they've got on top of the television. We're going to talk to the mother as well as see how the baby's weight gain and feeding okay. We're more concerned with the mother as well as the baby in the first few months of life.
Yeah, you almost go into the house knowing that the pressures are such that she is going to be distraught, that something will be going wrong in the daily routine. It's a question of spotting the vital few.
They see adverts on television and they read books, and the mothers are all made up with a sleeping baby and all dressed up. Now, I go at 12, 1 o'clock to some houses and they're in a dressing gown and they apologise, and I say, don't worry, it's normal. I was probably in my dressing gown at 1 o'clock when my children were young.
But when a professional comes into a house, it's a bit different, isn't it? A mum's group or contact with other mums, non-professionals, then people are a bit more relaxed.
I like to think that the mothers think of health visitors as a friend as well as a professional. She's a friend who knows what she's talking about, but she's still a friend.
I'm running out of time. I presume as a GP you would say not just a health visitor, but also go to the group practice.
Yes.
Pretty early rather than late.
That's right. I mean, things are much easier to prevent. I mean, and the other thing is that if you want to talk to a non-professional, talk to Parent Line.
Which is the number up on the box.
That's right.
And if you can't get through, talk to your neighbour, talk to somebody.
That's right.
Good luck in 5 weeks' time. Our programme hasn't worried you, has it?
No, I'd just like to say that about the families.
I'm going to say goodbye to the viewers while you talk to me about the families. 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, satellite hookup with Moscow. See you then. Now about the families.
Do you have a twin brother or sister? If so, the time, the place would like to hear from you. So if you're a twin, identical or otherwise, please ring this number now, 0898 345 499.